what the gift is, what this program has given me, hope. I had so many doctors, neurologists. Well, this is it. This is as good as it's going to get. Sorry, not much more we can do for you.
How many can resonate with that, eh?
That's a horrible thing to hear. But coming here and listening and seeing people face to face, I mean, yes, it's over Zoom, but they're getting better and they're back to work. They're doing things with their life. And I know just from the short time that I've been doing the program, maybe 2 months now, huge difference. I mean, there are no words to put it, to express it. Welcome. Thank you. And that's the other thing I wanted to say. I was 3 years out when I came into this program, and to see a difference after that.
3 years out, huge difference in 2 months, right? So is recovery possible? A resounding yes. And best of all, like I said, you can do this without having to spend all your time and money seeing countless professionals or going to fancy treatment clinics and spending $10,000 a week to do whatever else. You don't need to do it, right? Concussion care just simply requires you to find the root causes that are driving your symptoms. Maybe for you, it's hormones. Maybe for you, it's diet. Maybe for you, it's your sleep. Maybe for you, it's exercise. Maybe it's a combination of those things. But every single one of these things is a treatable thing. You just have to find out what are your things. All right. So who is this workshop for? This workshop is for you. If you are, one, tired of seeing countless healthcare professionals and getting nowhere. Two, if you are frustrated that no one seems to know what's going on or how to help, right? Have you seen countless medical professionals who just keep blowing you off and pushing you aside, and you really get the sense that they don't really understand what you're going through? Number three, those who are ready and willing to do whatever it takes to get their lives back. And let's key in on the ready and willing, right? A lot of times people say that they want to get better. They say that they're ready to recover, but you actually have to be ready. You have to be ready and willing to do whatever it takes. You have to be fed up to the point where you go, I'm going to get rid of these symptoms. Now that you know it's possible, based on the videos I just showed you, right? Those of you who are going to make a commitment to yourselves right now that are going to say, look, I'm going to follow the advice here. I've seen from people that it works. I'm confident that it will work, and I'm going to show you what those strategies are. But you have to make a commitment to yourself right now, to your family, to your spouse, to your loved ones, to your friends, to everybody else in your mind right now that I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to beat this, and away we go, right? Once you know the strategies, recovery is simple. But it is not easy. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it. There's a lot of setbacks that you're going to experience along the way. And if you're not ready and willing to do whatever it takes, that's when you're going to kind of fall apart, right? So we have to kind of establish that right now. So who am I? My name is Dr. Cameron Marshall. I'm actually a chiropractor by trade. I'm a sports medicine specialist. That's where I did all my research in concussion. And when I was going through my residency and started researching concussion, realized that the big problem with concussion is that nobody knows what they're doing. There's a lot of research out there showing that various treatments are effective and various things can be done for concussion patients, but the problem is it takes research between 15 to 25 years to make it into mainstream medicine. Most medical professionals have never been taught anything to do with concussion. In fact, there were studies done in Canada and the United States that show that concussion is not even on the curriculum at most medical schools. So there's a reason why your doctor blows you off. There's a reason why your neurologist blows you off. It's because they don't know. And the research that's been published in the past 10 to 15 years is still sitting in their inbox because they haven't gotten around to getting to it yet. So 15 to 25 years it takes research to make it into clinical practice. So that is why you feel like your healthcare professionals are not necessarily giving you the right advice. So I'm a published concussion researcher. I'm also a clinician and a podcaster. For those of you that listen to my show, Ask Concussion Doc. I'm a past board member of Brain Injury Canada. I'm also the founder of the largest concussion care and rehabilitation network in the world called Complete Concussion Management. We have hundreds of clinics in multiple countries that basically do concussion rehab and also do preseason testing testing for athletes and return to sport management and things like that. And I'm also the founder of the Concussion Fix program, the program which you just heard those two lovely ladies speak about that they are involved with. And so these are the strategies that I'm going to teach you in this session. So today, we're going to learn what a concussion is and why you feel the way you feel. We're going to talk about the 5 main causes of persistent concussion symptoms and provide you with a step-by-step protocol to find, isolate, locate, and address each of those particular causes. Who's ready? I know I am. I always get super excited to share my knowledge with this. My passion in this world, my mission on this planet is to reduce the pain and suffering of patients with persistent concussion symptoms because it is needless suffering, right? You saw those two individuals, and I have hundreds of those, by the way. You saw those two individuals and what they said. They were struggling, right? Just like you are. These are people that are just like you, no different. They had a concussion. They have symptoms. They're not getting the right answers. They're blown off. They're told by doctors that there's nothing that can be done. And they come to an online program and all they do is learn what they can do and how to do it. That's the best, right? So who's ready? Who's committed? If you're committed, you can even type it into the chat down below. Make your commitment known. Make your stance known that you are going to do whatever it takes to get better. All right? So let's dig on in. I also just want to make a note here. I do see comments rolling in and there's going to be questions along the way. Just feel free to keep that going. I ignore it because it just is distracting for me. But at the end, I will do some Q&A. So if you do have questions along the way, just feel free to type them into the chat. My assistant, Pammy here, is going to be pulling questions off and giving me a list so that I'm able to answer them at the end. Any questions I'm not able to get to, that's okay. We'll do emails out after, so you can ask me those questions afterwards. I want to make sure you guys get the best benefit out of this thing. Okay, so let's dive in here. So, what is a concussion? A concussion is a temporary energy deficit. Post-concussive deficits occur with very little, if any, observable pathology. So this is a study looking at what happens in the brain when a concussion happens. Post-concussion deficits occur with very little, if any, observable pathology. So that means that your MRI or your CT scan, your CAT scans, are going to come back normal in the majority of cases because those things look at the structure of the brain. Concussion is a functional injury. It changes how the brain functions, but it doesn't change the structure. So there's actually no brain damage that happens with a concussion. And most people don't get this. Most people don't understand this. They think there's got to be something wrong with my brain. And in the initial phase, there is, but it's a functional deficit. It changes how the brain cells function. So when you look at an MRI or CT scan, it's going to be normal. All right. So do you need an MRI? Not usually. Symptoms often resolve completely over time. And in fact, 70% of concussions, their symptoms will be gone within the first 2 weeks. I know, sons of bitches, right? The other 30%, unfortunately, will have symptoms for weeks to months to years afterwards. That is the miserable minority, that 30%. That's the persistent concussion symptoms group, right? Most of the people in here right now are going to be a part of that group, and I'm going to explain why that is. Symptoms often resolve completely over time, which indicates that the injury is a temporary dysfunction rather than a structural injury. So again, this is why it doesn't show up on imaging. 2 distinct phases to a concussion. The first is excitatory, and the second is called spreading depression. And so I'm going to break each of those down for you here. What causes concussion? Well, it's not hits to the head. This is what people also get confused with. They will say that, oh, if I bump my head, that's I got a concussion from that. That's not necessarily true. The thing that causes concussion is acceleration or deceleration of the brain. You can get hit in the body and get a concussion, provided enough acceleration happens through the brain, right? So little bumps like this to your head don't cause concussions because there's no acceleration of the brain. You need a big, strong movement of the brain. And you can see here, when you have a strong impact like this, the brain keeps moving and it moves back and forth and kind of sloshes around. So that's really the key here. You can see there's this kind of fluid wave that happens. See how that kind of fluid wave goes through and bounces back and forth? Well, that's what causes the concussion injury. So it's a functional disturbance. There's two parts. Like I said, the first part is the excitatory phase. So you have acceleration and deceleration of the brain. What happens is each individual brain cell, if you want to picture them like long strings, they get stretched. Okay? They get stretched. Now, they come right back, right? They're elastic. They get stretched and come back. But in the moment that they get stretched, that creates a stimulation of the axon. Right? It stimulates it. So what does a neuron do, or a brain cell do when it's stimulated? Well, it fires. Our nervous system is an electrical system. And so if we stimulate it, it fires with an electrical signal. That signal goes to the next neuron. That neuron receives the signal and then fires and passes the signal on. So that's how communication happens in our nervous system. And normally, if I'm, looking at you guys, or I'm looking at my camera right now, the signals will come into my eyes, or the light from the camera will come into my eyes. It'll go in certain directions, and it will form a picture that my brain puts all together and says, this is what your surroundings look like. That may then store as memories. It may, not. It just depends, right? So all of this stuff goes in a nice sequential path. Those things are figured out. When you get a concussion injury, you get millions of neurons all at the same time that go through action potentials, which creates an electrical storm in the brain. So nothing makes sense. Things aren't going in a normal pattern. They're going everywhere, right? So this can cause your immediate symptoms. This may make you see stars, right? You're not seeing stars. What you're actually seeing is the visual representation of multiple neurons in your visual cortex firing. And in your visual field, you're like, whoa, boom, 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 I'm seeing stars. You're not seeing stars. That's just the illusion of that. You may feel dizzy, right? Because everything is going all over the place. You don't know where you are. Your brain can't make sense of directions because there's so much misinformation happening that your brain can't figure it out. You may have headaches. You may lose consciousness. You may not. 90% of concussions do not have a loss of consciousness. So just sometimes doctors will tell patients, well, you didn't get knocked out. You don't have a concussion. That's not true. You don't have to get knocked out. Okay? But it happens in about 10% of patients. You could have headaches, you could have nauseousness, you could have a variety of different symptoms, balance impairments, hearing difficulties, extreme fatigue, right? And extreme fatigue comes next, because after that firing electrical storm, which only lasts a couple minutes, right? The initial boom, onset, dizziness, all that usually lasts a few minutes. After that, you get into phase 2. Phase 2 is called spreading depression. And the reason it's called a depression is because our energy levels go low. ATP is the energy molecule inside our nervous system. And this right here is a group that never got a concussion. So you can see this is their base level energy. 1 minute after injury, you can see there's a drop. 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 hours after injury. This little star means significantly different, meaning that after 2 hours, we have a significant difference in our energy levels. 6 hours after injury, we hit our peak low. Then we gradually build back up. 48 hours, still significantly different. 120 hours, which is 5 days, no more significant difference. So from concussion injury, we create this electrical storm, which ultimately results in an energy deficit. And during this period of time, this is the danger zone. If you get hit again during this time, that's when things can become additive and cumulative and create worse injuries. But if you get back up to this point, you're basically back to fully recovered. Okay? Now, the problem is, this is in mice. We can't take humans and just knock them on the head and see what happens. Right? So we have a lot of good studies with mice, and we know what the pathophysiology looks like by looking at mice brain. In humans, we have a technology called magnetic resonance spectroscopy. Now, this is an imaging modality, and before you think you can go and get one of these, you can't, because they're research tools only at this point. But right here, basically, NAA is a correlate of ATP. So if you look at these black bars, this is essentially ATP, which is back here, the same thing. Great, we're looking at a drop in ATP. That's our energy molecule. We hit our peak low at 6 hours, and we continue up. This is humans. So let's look at the black bars. This is humans that were participating in sport and just happened to get a concussion and were enrolled in a study. This is 3 days after concussion, significant difference. This is 15 days after concussion, significant difference. 22 days, so 3 weeks after concussion, still we have a significant difference than our control group, which never got a concussion. Then 30 days after injury, that single star has disappeared. We have no more significant difference, meaning that what took 5 days in a mouse to recover, it takes, anywhere between 3 to 4 weeks to recover in a human. So the majority of patients, right, 70% of patients are going to be asymptomatic within a couple weeks. But what we're talking about today are those with persistent concussion symptoms. PCS, post-concussion syndrome, it used to be called. And these are patients whose symptoms are lasting longer than 4 weeks. And it could be years, but you're still classified as PCS, okay? Now, if our injury happens and if our ATP recovers, why are we still having symptoms? All right? Well, there's 5 main causes, and most of it has nothing to do with our brains. Number 1 is blood flow abnormalities. This is also known as autonomic nervous system dysregulation. Your autonomic nervous system has 2 components to it. You have a sympathetic system, which is your fight or flight, right? This is your, oh my God, a bear is chasing me. Adrenaline gets pumped out. Cortisol gets released. Your blood flow dilates to your working muscles to allow you to go. Your pupils dilate to get ready to be able to, think quickly and move quickly and do all these types of things. That's your sympathetic system. Your parasympathetic system is called your rest and digest. It's the one that controls your gut, your digestion, your sleep, all of these things to allow you to just be calm and collected and cool. Okay? After concussion, we have high sympathetic drive and we have low parasympathetic drive. So what this does is it affects the blood flow that goes to our brains. Blood flow is constricted. We're not getting the right amount of blood flow. So what happens is we may feel fine when we're resting, but as soon as we do a little bit of exercise, boom, symptoms. As soon as we go back to work, symptoms. As soon as we try to do cognitive activity, hang out in crowds, do whatever, symptoms. All right? So this is an autonomic nervous system issue, and it creates blood flow issues. Inflammatory. All right? So the other one here is inflammation. Any injury is going to result in an inflammatory response. Inflammation is not just in your brain. It goes throughout your body and actually goes to your gut, and it affects how your gut works. And it also affects how your hormones are regulated. So a lot of the signaling hormones come from our brains. If we have brain injury, those can be impacted. So we get differentiation in the amount of hormones released sometimes, and sometimes it's a symbiotic relationship with our gut. When we get inflammation happening in the gut and we get dysbiosis of the gut, which changes our gut bacteria, we get an alteration in the neurotransmitters that are produced. Serotonin is one that stabilizes our mood. Serotonin, most of it is produced in your gut. So if you have gut health issues, that can lead to depression, anxiety, etc. Okay, so inflammation is a big one here. Visual vestibular dysfunction, okay, this one's self-explanatory. Your eyes can be off, they may not move properly, they may not work properly. Your inner ear vestibular system, same type of thing. It can throw you off, make you feel dizzy and all of that stuff. Number 4 is your cervical spine, so that means your neck. Anytime you get a concussion, you're also going to have some sort of cervical spine injury, some sort of neck injury that happens at the same time. Straining of the muscles, straining of the ligaments, jamming up of the joints, whatever. Because concussion is an acceleration injury. Whiplash is an acceleration injury. Concussion is acceleration of the brain. Whiplash is acceleration of the neck. So if you have acceleration of the head, you're going to have acceleration of the neck. So these 2 injuries happen simultaneously. Concussion takes about 3 to 4 weeks to recover. Whiplash can take months. So if you get a simultaneous head injury and neck injury, the concussion may have recovered, but the neck injury has the same symptoms as concussion. Headaches, dizziness, nauseousness, fogginess, all of these things. And it may actually just be because you have ongoing neck dysfunction. So if you get your neck treated and worked on, it can alleviate all the symptoms, right? It has nothing to do with your neck fixing your brain. It's because the symptoms you're experiencing are not actually coming from your brain. They're coming from the neck. Okay? So that's a big one that people often have too. And then finally, the psychological. Now, this one is often difficult to bring up with patients because people don't like it. There's a stigma around it. People think that when I say this, I'm suggesting that it's all in your head or that you're making it up or that you're fabricating it. And that's not the case at all. Okay? Psychological is the fact that this could be pre-existing. Patients with pre-existing anxiety and depression often will have a more difficult time to recover. These are barriers to recovery. But oftentimes, it's the result of the injury itself. Right? You may have never had depression before. You may have never had anxiety before or PTSD. But if you had a significant injury in a car accident, PTSD is going to be very likely. And that's a barrier to getting better. If you are told that there's nothing that can be done for you, that you can't go to work, that your partner is now leaving you, that you have no more social circle because everyone's abandoned you and no one wants to hang out with you, that's going to cause depression. That's going to cause anxiety. Those symptoms are the result of not just the concussion, but the treatment and the improper management of your injury. And that can result in prolonged recovery. So it's always involved to some degree, right? So the moment you get your head around that and start just considering that there could be an element of psychological factors at play, and I'm going to prove that to you too as we go through, you'll see some really interesting things in this presentation. So again, those of you that may be struggling to kind of stay on, just do what you can to stay here. If you got to just close your eyes a little bit and just listen, that is fine. So each of these are all treatable. Okay? It's simple. It's very, very simple. But I don't want to minimize it because it is not easy, right? This is where most people get lost. This is the concussion care maze. This is what happens to most people. Here's you. Consider yourself sitting in the middle of a round circular room with a bunch of doors. And each of those doors leads to a path or a hallway. And then at the end of that hallway, there's going to be another door. Sometimes it's just a straight up dead end. Sometimes there's a key that doesn't get you anywhere unless you can find the lock that it opens. Now picture that you're sitting in this, and this pathway here, let's say, is neurology. This pathway here is neurooptometry. This pathway here is vestibular therapy. This pathway here is chiropractic. This pathway here is cognitive therapy, occupational therapy, etc. You name it. So there's all these potential avenues that one can go when they have a concussion injury. Now, the problem is we're not given good guidance on where to go first. So a lot of these pathways are just going to be complete dead ends, right? Oh, I did vestibular. It wasn't really a good thing, right? Some of them, they're going to be keys that are only going to be helpful once you can find out the lock because things work together. For example, when your eyes move, your eyes are constantly asking the muscles and sensors in your neck where they are in space. If you have neck dysfunction, your eyes will get an altered signal from your neck, which will cause them to skip and move in different directions, which will make you feel off balance. So people with neck injuries will often feel like they have visual motion sensitivity, they can't ride in cars, they get nauseous, they don't like crowds in supermarkets, but it's actually a neck issue in some cases. Some cases a visual issue, right? But if they go to vision therapy thinking there's something going on with my eyes, they go to see a neurooptometrist. That neurooptometrist is going to give them rehab for their eyes. But guess what? It's not going to work. Why? Because they're missing the neck component. And if they had the key of the neck component dealt with first, they could then completely unlock the results of vision therapy. So things have to be done in a simultaneous way. You can't just do piecemeal things. And oftentimes you need the right direction. So what we've kind of tried to do, at least with the concussion fix, is we try to give you that roadmap. We try to sit you down and say, okay, just hang on a second. Let's build the foundation. Let's get all the component pieces in place here, right? So a lot of this is trial and error. A lot of this is lack of access to knowledgeable clinicians, right? If the person you're seeing doesn't really know what they're doing, they're not going to be able to guide you. And that's just the fact of the matter, right? The order in which you do things is often important, but we don't know what that order is. And our foundation is often lacking. Like I said, most people go right for rehab. So this is what we call the concussion recovery pyramid. Rehab is actually the last thing you want to start doing. The other components are the foundation, mindset, nervous system hyperarousal, right? If your nervous system is on edge and hyperaroused, you won't be able to do vestibular rehab because everything you do is going to set you back. Every time you try and do some cognitive stuff, you're going to feel flattened. It's because your nervous system is hyper-aroused, and we need to do things to calm that down first. Dealing with setbacks, stress reduction, inflammation, gut dysbiosis, sleep, hormone regulation. So this is kind of the next rung, right? So the first is mindset, nervous system, all that stuff. And then finally, once you've got that figured out and your systems are working, your physiology is working, now you can actually rehab it. Now it actually works, okay? Now, so that's the order and why that order is important. And most people, like I said, don't actually put in the time to do this because it's not told to them because their healthcare professional generally doesn't have a good working knowledge of this stuff. So let's go through the various causes. Autonomic dysregulation. Your autonomic nervous system is like a teeter-totter. So you have your parasympathetic system, which is your rest and digest. You have your sympathetic system, which is your fight or flight. Your sympathetic system actually shuts off digestion, right? It shuts off all of these things that you need to have a good, healthy system. What should happen is that you should be able to easily fluctuate between these systems throughout the day, right? And what happens in the concussion patient is your sympathetic is loaded up, way up. Your parasympathetic is completely shut off, because if one's on, the other one's off, right? It's an on-off switch. It can't be, both on. It's one is on and one is off, right? So if your sympathetic system is on, you're a constant fight or flight. You may not be sleeping well. You may have gut digestive issues because it's shut off your gut. You may feel anxious. You may be jittery or on edge at all times. You may feel fatigued, right? Think about yourself being on edge all the time. What's that going to do to your nervous system? Boom. Neuro fatigue, big time. Okay, a lot of this is just autonomic nervous system dysfunction. Concussion, like I said, creates a sympathetic dominance, so your fight or flight is overactive. This causes blood flow impairments in your brain, digestive issues, increased anxiety and stress, sleep problems, hormone imbalances, cognitive problems. Okay, how do we fix it? Well, we need to balance our autonomic nervous system. We have to raise our parasympathetic. And we do this through things called vagus nerve stimulation. So this is things like breathing techniques, diaphragmatic exercises, diet, mindfulness, meditation, improving our sleep, aerobic exercise. So usually it's a combination. We have a protocol actually in the Concussion Fix that we run that walks people through how to do this, how to balance the nervous system. And that's actually the first thing we do. Because if you don't do the groundwork, right, a lot of people with concussion, they're in a rush. Right, you're rushing in like, oh, it's my neck. I'm just going to get my neck fixed. Guess what will happen? It won't work because you haven't built your foundation yet. So unfortunately, it's one of those things where oftentimes with concussion, we just have to slow it, take a step back. Take a step back, work on the basics. Once you master the basics and all this stuff is working well, then recovery can happen. Recovery can't happen until you've worked on these basics. Even just exercise. So here's some of the evidence on exercise. Improves neuron function, cortical connectivity, how your brain works, blood flow, autonomic regulation, brain healing modulators, how your brain actually heals is promoted by exercise. What are we told to do with concussion? Rest. Do nothing. And that's actually not the case. The exercise evidence right now is coming out. It's huge, but it has to be done in the right way. You need to establish what your threshold is. Okay. And a lot of people don't understand that either. I'm not saying just go out and exercise because, again, you'll create problems for yourself. You have to do it in the right way. But look at the evidence on exercise. These are all studies that have been done where only exercise alone in patients with